Good afternoon, or good morning, even if we have people dialing in from the US. I'm very proud actually and about the opportunity to present here in call because everything I'm talking about is of course an end user study. It is in-house developed with using more or less tools and frameworks to get this delivered across our organization. And why I'm also proud about it, because it's live in 17 markets, particularly the digital ecosystem that we have built. Yes, I'm based in the UAE, and our organization in MTN Group is called GSSC, the Group Sourcing and Supply Chain Organization. And we have made this organization native digital. And I want to share actually the journey, the digital transformation journey that we had over the past 24 months. I think you also know MTN as a brand in Africa. And we also have a purpose as a telco in Africa, not only being the biggest telco operator on the continent and having already 270 million of mobile subscribers. We're also one that is a digital operator. We have our own messaging platform, Ioba. We do have our own Momo Money as a mobile money application. And we also do have our own music store, which provides local content of music in Africa. And we have a purpose, a major purpose that is related, of course, to digital and digital transformation in Africa, a purpose to connect the unconnected so that everyone ultimately can enjoy the benefits of a digital life. The Group Sourcing Organization is a very centralized organization serving, of course, the Middle East as well as Africa. And it's 21 operations, so 21 markets across our footprint that we serve out of GSSC. In terms of Techmate that I want to present is all around at the end about artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence as a use case that we are growing for our own decision making, of course, in sourcing and supply chain, is not a mean to an end, and it's not the sole objective. It needs to have a business objectives, and lots of my peers and also other corporates and end users are struggling to define that sort of business objective and also that sort of use case. Because ultimately, how I wrap up the presentation is about we started heavily in efficiency and automation and building the digital ecosystem for our markets and for the center as well. But nowadays, since we now have the data sorted, now we have smart data in place, we're using those algorithms, those machine learnings, those AI tools in making, let's say, data-driven decisions. And we are seeking for development of other use cases. And therefore, I think one of the lessons that I want to share in terms of the 24 months of journey, we started very small. On the efficiency side, we built a large digital ecosystem that is now well managed. And it took us time to get to that sort of maturity stage. And now we are starting again slow with small plants that are growing in order to enhance, let's say, the use cases more on the effectiveness side to come to strategic decision in sourcing. And a main building block, and I think some of the presenters have covered this as well, the digital transformation in my organization was creating, of course, a data-driven culture in my organization. And data-driven culture starts already that data is the new oxygen. Yeah, that data is goldish. That needs to be accepted and needs to be embedded in my organization and by the employees. So it's very much driven by a cultural change in the organization. If you look at stumbling blocks we had in order to get to the level of maturity that we have now, smart data in place, of course, was always, and that is in the past decades on data warehousing already occurring, is about formatization, the standardization of the data and the accuracy. And that goes hand in hand with the culture, because ultimately someone gathers, uploads, or puts in data, and it needs to be accurate data. In order to doing so, he needs to spend effort in doing and needs to have it very close to his chest or to his heart, the accuracy of that data input. Then, of course, also the honesty of data needs to be a part that we stumbled in the beginning in our data collection efforts, because you can have a perfect data point, you can have perfect data in place, it's very accurate, it's valid, but it doesn't reflect reality. And therefore you need associations, of course, created, associations that you do business and data scientists together in agile teams in order to bring association. And I give you an example, of course, if, of course, the turnover of staff is, of course, an indication for the staff moral. And that's how you also test, let's say, your valid data points. And timing issue was, of course, also, especially across our markets, across a large footprint across Africa and the Middle East, timing issues. The moment we have sorted out the data issues, the moment that we have uploaded the data, it was already getting old data. Time has elapsed in order to run the first analysis on it. So those are roadblocks that I would say were very key to get resolved in the beginning of our journey. And we have done this. We have done this, and one of the sponsors of this conference, and even the usage to facilitate that sort of conference today, we have taken a toolkit and we have come up with our own application that we call in our organization Boom, which has all to do about automation. It's a plug and play application into our environments, into our markets. The users are entering the data, but it's not a manual follow-up. It's not any longer Excel sheets. It's real-time extraction of data from platforms. It has workflows, notifications, and it was using a frame that we have then adapted in terms of with our own data mart definitions. And that has helped us, of course, to get data into our data lakes, into our warehousing, into our platforms, which is more consistent. It is not any longer manually driven. We are not chasing the data any longer because we have notifications out and reminders. And of course, it comes with the cultural change that the people that are using it also from an input layer are now much more careful and spending much more time in the accuracy of the data. But it's not very useful to just do the data collection side and build that digital ecosystem as long as you cannot action on it. And action, of course, we want to have fact-based data, fact-based decision making in sourcing and supply chain. That even helped us in crisis management during COVID times when it's about forecasting capacity and also tracking the logistics in terms of IoT or where orders and POs are standing in the value chain of OEM and a supplier, and to get it cleared in our markets during the lockdowns. But it needs to be actionable, because if you're just going to be on the efficiency side, if you're collecting, let's say, your smart data and you cannot action on it with business use cases, then it's just an understanding of memory in terms of insights and dashboards, but you are not action on making decision based on those facts. Therefore, I describe how we began to move in terms of our journey. So the cultural aspect was already said before by other presenters. It is this data-driven mindset in my organization that needed to change. And the drivers, of course, are our own academy that is focusing on our own publish or a publication in terms of digital news flashes that we get into the employees base, and also training, of course, in order to drive that sort of data mindset. Then also, of course, we just seen a presentation about bots. We created our own bot. Again, we only using frameworks and developing this in-house with our own teams and teams that are merged. So we have early started to employ, of course, profiles of data scientist groups and merge them all together with the business user. Because the challenge is always to come from insights and that smart data approach with a knowledge transfer, which can only be in conjunction with the business user. So we're talking about a senior strategic sourcer, or we're talking someone out of the supply chain area. Operational efficiency, as I said, we had a big leapfrog jump with our internal Boom application, which is the input data layer, and then real-time insights as well, which is our edge platform that I covered in the next slides, which is our data lake that brings everything together. And then I will also spend some time about fact-based decision-making, which is our DS application, a decision support application that we have also built in-house, which leads us later on to this outlook of a procurement cockpit in our organization across our footprint. That gives AI and machine learning analytics a possibility to make strategic decisions related to supply chain, but also related to strategic sourcing. And therefore, it's a digital transformation from efficiency towards effectiveness. The edge platform, what we call everything in-house, of course, developed. It does, of course, an underlying ERP system, which had a complete overhaul in terms of the e-sourcing suite, the trade engine, the demand planning tool, of course, which is a cost package, but it's coming from the cloud. It's cloud-based, and therefore we had an absolutely marvelous or a great start during the COVID crisis, because we were able to access those tools from home. It was not a client-based, it was not an on-prem installation, and that gave, of course, my organization the possibility to not drop the ball, particularly when business resilience was asked, crisis management under COVID was asked, to get secure for a telco operator that is very important to the economics in our markets, to keep the lights on. We were able to continue our business with not even one drop of productivity. In that edge platform, of course, as a data lake, we have inventory analytics, we have a visualization in terms of tower controls. And again, I need to remind the audience, it's out there in 17 markets in Africa. And we enhanced it with contract management, with lifecycle management events for the contracts in that edge platform. We do supplier management based on the data that comes out. Sourcing analytics, which is the subscriber of the edge platform, which is the strategic negotiation, where we are using the AI and the machine learning. Supplier performance analytics, of course, lead times when supplies get into our markets, the budget analytics and the project analysis and the demand planning is in there. And then we also do, of course, inventory forecast and improve the cash conversion cycle of the groups and also in our markets. But it's our one source of truth where that smart data is hosted and where various let's say, subscribers are attached to it. Now I'm coming back from leaving the efficiency part and going to the DSA, to the decision support application. And again, we have not spent now with system integrators, or with COTS providers, application providers, or with, let's say, consultants to think about strategic sourcing, to think about AI and machine learning and use cases. We have developed that in-house because I think it is anyhow as well a journey in itself. We have started with a small use case. We have now 3 modules already in the system, in-house developed. And of course, when I dot it out in terms of a circle, there will be more modules coming. And let me take maybe here a pause in reflecting about the use cases, because in my business practice, a lot of my peers are struggling to leave the efficiency and automation and the analytics part in terms of spend analytics, in terms of insights and visualization in a cockpit, to effectiveness. And effectiveness to me is the decision-making in sourcing and also in the supply chain arena. Where we have started in the beginning, in parallel, when we developed the digital ecosystem, we started with the first model, which was market share simulations. So we wanted to know when we are running tenders, and it's a very critical module nowadays, because you have a trade war going on, particularly also you have bans, sanctions of telco suppliers. We always wanted to know when we are running a group tender, what does it mean to our market share? Not only how we behave towards our peers and competitors in terms of market share, are we spending too much with one of the preferred suppliers? So spend patterns compared to others in terms of benchmark, but also when we run a tender and we would have our specific objective to award vendors through that sort of tendering process, what would it mean to market share simulation across our markets? It has to do with supplier concentration, it has to do with supplier diversification, de-risking in the supply chain, but this is automated now. So when we run tenders, we can immediately online simulate what would be a tender result mean in terms of market share simulation. So it's connected, interconnected, as a decision support application for the sourcing domain. Then we have started to look, in fact, like how I started with the Techmate, the scenario analysis in AI and machine learning. Because when you have group tenders and you invite a massive amount from the marketplace of suppliers, you want to simulate outcomes, possible outcomes. But the perpetuations and the possible scenarios in a group tender across our 17 or 21 markets, those solutions could be in the millions in terms of potential outcomes. And you want to, of course, pick the most preferred one on the restriction that you have. And you want, of course, to influence the restrictions that suppliers have and influence their sort of behavior that you're getting your desired output in a tender result. That's the module that we support strategic sourcing in lead negotiation with, which is the scenario analysis. And the third extension nowadays is price curve modeling. Price curve modeling is all about looking into the past in terms of price points, getting benchmarks from the market, that you know how the market on prices behaves. And then it has a prognosis as well in terms of how you extend price curves into the future. And it allows immediately also my strategic sourcing team to upload the offers of the vendors and to immediately know, is the offer at least a fair price value, or is it totally off, or is it even beating the fair price based on the past, based on the current benchmarks, and based also on, let's say, a kind of prognostic approach, how prices evolve over time. And when I now say I've dotted the circle, I think we are now in the phase of sorting out our smart data aspects on e-auctioning. And e-auctioning is, of course, long around in the sourcing and supply chain arena. But the e-auctioning we want to, of course, with AI and machine learning extend. We extend it, of course, in terms of game theory. So we are trying to do behavior modeling. We're trying to do, let's say, the back testing of behaviors of our suppliers. And then we want to have a desired output. And we need to put parameters into the e-auction, like a game in the game theory, that comes out of that sort of algorithm, or out of that sort of machine learning, in order to get desired outcomes, the best desired outcomes in terms of vendors moving to that result. I'll move on in terms of how important that is for sourcing, of course, strategic sourcing. Every pound counts. So it is also a practice of a team that starts from data science to strategic sourcing, or even has the legal and the contract management in one team facing off towards the negotiation with observers, of course. Objective, I mean, if you're looking at the massive tenders, as I said, millions of possible scenarios that could be an outcome, and you want to influence, of course. You want to predict the unpredictable, you want to influence the behavior of the vendors in order to get the desired outcome. And that means also you need to read the opponents in the marketplace, the suppliers we're facing off towards to. And that's where I think the big value, like in chess, of course, of the next moves, that's the big value of AI and machine learning in the business negotiation. And I talked about the cockpit, of course, and where we have gathered all the intelligence. And as you can see, we have nowadays in this engine, in the decision support engine, we analyze the behavior in a negotiation in the various rounds. We give insight to my organization about the strategy and the actions in future in a game theory-wise in an electronic auction. We optimize the decision-making on the various scenarios we only want to focus on. And we also reduce risk because we're already online simulating, let's say, market share distribution, market share developments in future when we do the awards due to this tender. It's supported by machine learning. And when I say machine learning and AI, we are taking open source and we develop it in-house. So I think that's very important to come across, because I think those rules, those data points, and also the insights of that smart data to make decision-making that needs to be catered in-house. That decision we have taken. We don't want to go out into the market to get this developed or even hosted. Understanding of post-trends. If you understand your past, you can predict the future, of course, and it will also evolve on the price curve side, a prognosis how prices will evolve. We will have the external and internal benchmark data and also an audit trail, of course, which led us to the specific business negotiation and decision attached to it. This ends the presentation on my side. I'm pleased to answer your question, of course, in the chat or later on also per email or in the chat rooms. Anisha, thank you very much. I wish everyone a further pleasant day and a fruitful conference. I'm getting often asked, of course, is this now installed? And maybe as a reply, it's live. Then I'm getting the question, is it also getting used? Yes, it gets used, but it is still a cultural undertaking in terms of the penetration, how much it gets used. Is it finished? Is the third question, and my answer to it, it's never finished because the machines just started to learn. And Anisha, I hand over to you.